What makes Steven Spielberg the most trusted storyteller in Hollywood? Is it the dinosaurs, the war epics, the childhood fantasies, or the way he rewrote cinematic history? The truth is, it's none of those. Spielberg's secret weapon has always been people, the rare actors who anchor his stories and carry his vision straight into the audience's chest. For over 5 decades, he's worked with hundreds of performers, but only a handful ever earned his deepest trust. These weren't just casting choices, they were bonds, some forged over decades, others in a single unforgettable role. These actors didn't just play characters, they became part of Spielberg's DNA, the living gravity that kept his films from floating away. And once you see who made the cut, you'll realize something shocking. Spielberg's true masterpieces aren't just built on spectacle. They're built on faces, voices, and souls that could never be replaced. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why these 6 actors stand higher than the rest, and why Spielberg himself says he'll never let them go. Some directors find actors. Spielberg found a twin. When Tom Hanks first stepped into Spielberg's world, it wasn't just casting. It was a fusion. From Saving Private Ryan to Catch Me If You Can, The Terminal, Bridge of Spies, and The Post, their names became inseparable. For over 25 years, Spielberg has handed Hanks the roles that carried the most emotional weight: war, history, moral conflict, human fragility, and every single time, Hanks delivered. Their bond has become one of the most reliable partnerships in Hollywood, the kind that shapes not just individual films, but decades of cinema. What makes their connection rare isn't the friendship, it's the trust. Hanks once said, "When Steven calls, I don't ask what it is. I just say yes." That wasn't Hollywood flattery. That was a rule. Spielberg doesn't have to explain. He doesn't have to push. He simply trusts that Hanks will find the truth inside the moment. It's why Spielberg gives him the kind of roles that demand quiet strength rather than loud spectacle. On the set of Saving Private Ryan, Spielberg barely gave direction, sometimes just a nod, sometimes a whisper, because he knew Hanks would ground the chaos with honesty. And he was right. That film didn't just become one of the greatest war movies ever made, it became a benchmark for authenticity, and Hanks was the emotional anchor holding it all together. Other actors bring fire, some bring chaos, but Hanks brings gravity. He doesn't steal scenes, he steadies them. He gives Spielberg the invisible oxygen his stories need, even in roles where the spotlight could have overwhelmed him, like Ben Bradley in The Post. Hanks made the performance feel effortless, like the newsroom was built around his presence. Spielberg described it as watching a journalistic lion, but the power wasn't in roaring, it was in restraint. That's why Spielberg circles back to him again and again. It's not about spectacle, it's not about ego, it's about reliability, empathy, and control. Hanks doesn't try to impress, he just shows up prepared, ego buried, heart wide open. And Spielberg, who thrives on control, found in Hanks something even stronger than control: certainty. Their relationship has gone beyond collaboration, it's creative fusion. Spielberg gives Hanks the toughest roles, the ones layered with history and morality. In return, Hanks gives him performances so consistent and honest that Spielberg doesn't have to worry about the heart of the story. He knows it will always be there. And in return, Spielberg gives him something few actors ever receive: legacy. Together, they shaped not just moments on screen, but the very standard of what modern cinema could feel like. Hanks doesn't just appear in Spielberg's films, he defines them. Because when Hanks is in the frame, Spielberg doesn't just get a performance, he gets permanence. But Spielberg's trust doesn't always come from years of repetition. Sometimes it comes from a single once-in-a-lifetime performance. If Tom Hanks became Spielberg's twin through decades of trust, Daniel Day-Lewis became something else entirely, a presence so powerful it didn't need to return. When Spielberg cast Day-Lewis as Abraham Lincoln, it wasn't just casting, it was invocation. By the time Day-Lewis arrived on set, Lincoln wasn't a role anymore. It was standing in front of Spielberg in flesh and spirit. Crew members described moments where they forgot they were shooting a movie. Even Spielberg himself admitted that it felt like time travel. Day-Lewis never approached acting like anyone else. He didn't rehearse in the traditional sense, he transformed. Spielberg respected that completely. During filming, he never addressed him as Daniel or even Mr. Day-Lewis. He called him Mr. President, both on and off set. Not as a gimmick, but because that's what the work demanded. The man in front of him wasn't pretending. He was embodying. The result was one of the most haunting performances of the decade. It wasn't loud. It wasn't filled with theatrical fireworks. It was quiet, deliberate, and deeply human. Every pause carried weight. Every glance felt like history itself breathing again. Spielberg, who is known for guiding every detail of his productions, admitted that with Day-Lewis, he had to step back. "I didn't direct him," he said. "I just witnessed him." That level of reverence doesn't come often. Spielberg almost never surrenders control, but in the presence of Day-Lewis, he knew the greatest thing he could do was give him space. And that space changed everything. Lincoln went on to be one of Spielberg's most respected films, and Day-Lewis won the Academy Award for his portrayal. What makes this collaboration even more fascinating is how rare it was. Day-Lewis had turned Spielberg down before. It took years of persistence before he finally said yes. And once the film was complete, he never came back. Not because of tension, not because of failure, but because lightning doesn't strike twice in the same storm. In a career defined by great partnerships, this was a one-time phenomenon, but it was enough. Day-Lewis gave Spielberg something no other actor ever had, the sense that cinema could bend time itself. One film, one role, one presidency. That's all it took for Daniel Day-Lewis to secure a permanent place in Spielberg's top tier. And after experiencing the timeless weight of Lincoln, Spielberg would soon return to the kind of collaboration that defined his most adventurous side, a bond with the man who became the very face of action itself. There are actors who make characters famous, and then there are actors who become the character. For Spielberg, Harrison Ford wasn't just Indiana Jones. He was a compass, steady, rugged, and always pointing the story in the right direction. Their partnership began with a simple image: a hat, a whip, and a smirk. But what followed was more than just an adventure franchise. It was decades of loyalty, confidence, and quiet understanding between two men who knew how to trust each other. Spielberg once said, "Harrison brings confidence into a room, and when the camera rolls, that confidence becomes myth." Ford was already known as Han Solo when Spielberg cast him, but Indiana Jones was something different. He wasn't invincible. He bled, he groaned, he stumbled, and he got back up again. That was the blueprint for the modern action hero, larger than life, but still human. And Ford embodied it to the core. The productions were brutal, the pace was relentless, but Ford never flinched. On the set of The Last Crusade, Spielberg remembered a moment where Ford insisted on doing a dangerous stunt himself. No doubles, no hesitation, just trust. Ford told him, "If I get hurt, you'll know it was worth it." That was Harrison in a sentence, unshaken, committed, and all in. What makes Ford's bond with Spielberg so unique isn't just his longevity, it's his silence. He's not an actor who campaigns for roles, who plays politics behind the scenes, or who drowns in Hollywood noise. He shows up, does the work, and leaves the rest behind. Spielberg valued that deeply. He once said Ford gave him authenticity on demand. Whether it was humor, heartbreak, or pure physical grit, Ford delivered it without fail. 4 Indiana Jones films later, their partnership became more than a working relationship. It was a legacy. Spielberg has said openly that if he ever directs another adventure film, there's still only one man he'd want in the lead, because Ford isn't just reliable, he's irreplaceable. Harrison Ford doesn't fight to steal the frame, he is the frame. And for Spielberg, that kind of reliability isn't just rare, it's the foundation of myth. But Spielberg's eye for talent didn't stop with the veterans. Sometimes he saw potential in someone the world had already labeled, and he proved everyone wrong. That's exactly what happened when he crossed paths with a young star who had just survived the tidal wave of Titanic. When Spielberg first met Leonardo DiCaprio, the world saw him as the boyish megastar from Titanic. Girls screamed his name, magazines printed his face on every cover, and Hollywood assumed he would coast on heartthrob status. But Spielberg didn't see that. He saw something sharper, something controlled, something like a scalpel. Their collaboration, Catch Me If You Can, wasn't just another film for DiCaprio. It was the turning point. Spielberg stripped away the glossy charm the world expected and exposed the desperation underneath. Frank Abagnale Jr. wasn't just a slick con artist. He was a broken kid hiding behind a flawless suit. and Spielberg trusted DiCaprio to cut deep into that vulnerability. On set, Spielberg praised his timing, saying DiCaprio had a clock inside him that never missed a beat. Every line landed with precision. Every glance carried both innocence and deception. Spielberg didn't have to correct him, he just watched in awe. The film redefined DiCaprio's career. No longer just a heartthrob, he proved he had range, subtlety, and weight. And Spielberg was the one who gave him that bridge. They never worked together again, though Spielberg often spoke about wanting to. He called DiCaprio's performance in The Revenant devastating and hinted that the door was always open. For Spielberg, it only took one movie to see DiCaprio's full potential. One perfect film, infinite possibilities. Proof that even legends can still be surprised. But Spielberg's admiration wasn't limited to the young or the rising. Sometimes it was reserved for icons he had quietly respected for decades, actors he waited nearly a lifetime to finally direct. Steven Spielberg admired Meryl Streep from afar for nearly 4 decades before they finally worked together. And when it happened, it wasn't just casting, it felt like a tribute. In 2017, Streep joined the post almost overnight after the project was fast-tracked to meet a political moment. She stepped into the role of Katharine Graham, the Washington Post publisher who stood against government pressure during the Pentagon Papers scandal. For most actors, that kind of rushed preparation would have been overwhelming. For Streep, it looked effortless, as if she had been preparing her entire life. Spielberg described directing her as conducting a symphony with one instrument. Every glance, every pause, every breath carried intention. She didn't dominate the room, she dissolved into it, controlling the scene without ever seeming to. Spielberg, who rarely admits to nerves, confessed that Streep was the first actor who ever made him feel intimidated on set. The performance wasn't loud or showy, but layered and restrained. It earned Streep her 21st Oscar nomination, but more importantly, it earned Spielberg's deepest respect. He compared her presence to Daniel Day-Lewis, surgical, internal, and profoundly human. Afterward, Spielberg didn't just call her great, he called her essential. Not essential to the film, but to cinema itself. For a director who has worked with nearly every legend alive, that kind of praise is rare. He even admitted that she reminded him why he loved the act of directing, because with actors like Streep, the camera doesn't just capture a performance, it captures truth. Their collaboration may have only lasted for one film, but it was enough. One performance, perfectly timed, left Spielberg saying he would drop anything to work with her again. Because for him, Streep wasn't just another actor, she was the room itself. And if Streep gave him symphony and precision, the next actor gave him something completely different: chaos, laughter, and heart. A performer who brought light to Spielberg's darkest days. Robin Williams didn't just play Peter Pan. For Steven Spielberg, he made him believe in Peter Pan again. When they worked together on Hook in the early 1990s, Spielberg was going through one of the most draining productions of his career. The set was massive, the schedule was behind, and the pressure weighed heavier every day. Spielberg, who usually thrived on control, found himself overwhelmed. And that's when Robin noticed. Every night after shooting, Williams would call Spielberg, not to discuss scenes or schedules, but to make him laugh. He'd improvise for 15 minutes straight, creating characters, spinning jokes, doing whatever it took to lift the director's spirits. No ego, no exhaustion, just presence. Spielberg later admitted that those calls were the only thing that kept him sane during the chaos of Hook. On screen, Williams gave Peter Pan something no one expected: an adult sadness. Beneath the jokes and the wonder, there was the ache of forgotten youth, the quiet weight of time. He turned a fairy tale into something deeply personal, something Spielberg himself never forgot. The movie may not have been a critical masterpiece, but the performance stayed with him forever. Their friendship continued long after the cameras stopped rolling. Years later, when Williams passed, Spielberg delayed the start of Schindler's List filming as he struggled with the loss. He said Robin was lightning in a bottle, and when he left, the room just dimmed. What made Williams unforgettable to Spielberg wasn't perfection, it was life itself. He was unpredictable, chaotic, and free, the one wild element in a director's world built on structure and control. And that's exactly why Spielberg loved him. Robin Williams only worked with Spielberg once, but he didn't need to return. Some performances echo, some presences stay alive long after the credits roll. For Spielberg, Robin wasn't just a collaborator. He was a reminder that film isn't just about control. Sometimes it's about letting magic loose in the frame. For Steven Spielberg, casting has never just been about filling a role. It's been about gravity, the weight an actor brings that pulls every frame into focus. Tom Hanks gave him trust. Daniel Day-Lewis gave him time itself. Harrison Ford gave him myth. Leonardo DiCaprio gave him precision. Meryl Streep gave him symphony. And Robin Williams gave him light when the room felt dark. Some of these partnerships stretched across decades. Others lasted for only one unforgettable film. But every single one left Spielberg with more than just a performance. They left him with reflection. They shaped how he saw characters, how he shaped silence, and how he balanced chaos with heart. Spielberg never talks about favorites. He talks about moments, fleeting, fragile, unforgettable moments that became the DNA of modern cinema. And those 6 actors, they didn't just star in his movies. They became part of his storytelling soul. So now the question is yours. Which of these legends do you think brought out the very best in Spielberg? And is there someone you wish he had worked with again? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you love exploring the untold stories behind Hollywood's greatest names, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the next story we uncover might just change the way you see movies forever.